Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Kia ora koutou katoa, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Jolly, are we ready to rock and roll? I think we are. Fantastic. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to the Cozy Fantasy Trends panel. I am your humble host, Nat Connors, and before I introduce you to our puissant panel, I'd like to show you a little something. Stop laughing. I'd like to show you a little something we've made for this discussion. I will pop it in the chat. Is that a thing I can do? I'm sure. There's the comments here. Yeah, let's just try that. Click a comment. Does anyone know how to put things in the chat? Because I don't seem to be able to do that after all.
I think you have to
You may have to join your YouTube account to this.
Ooh, okay. Look, I'll try and do it. If someone else could, if someone else could pop the link through. All right. Look, I will do this in just a moment while we're talking. Okay. So what we have, in fact, what I might do is get Jolly to pop it in the chat if he could. This is called an interactive infographic, and you can scroll up or down through it to investigate the most popular cozy fantasy books on the Kindle store. What we're going to be doing for this session is that our panelists will be working through it and talking about what they see and anything else that takes their fancy. So feel free to follow along with us or to just sit back and listen to the mellifluous sound of our voices. Some of us.
We just have a comment in comments from Lynn. Thanks, Lynn. So she's asking us to read the link aloud.
Sure. Just a moment, Lynn. What I'm going to do is.
Oh, it looks like Misty popped it in there for you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just read it. Just read it aloud. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So kindletrends.com/cozy fantasy. I am just. Oh, that was scary. Okay, here we go. Look at that, rock and roll. Okay, thank you very much for your patience, everyone. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our puissant panel. The marvelous Usher Evans is the author of the Weary Dragon Inn series and the new P.J. Norris series. Incidentally, I was reading the first of the Weary Dragon books yesterday, and I love the maps. I'm a big fan. Any book that has a map in the front, you got me.
That is Stardust Book Services, and I actually have another cozy fantasy series called The Pobbid Perfections, and both Pobbid and P.J. Norris are spinoffs from the Weary Dragon Inn. So it's kind of like it's not necessary to read it, but like they're all kind of interconnected.
The numinous AJ Lancaster is the New Zealand-based author of How to Find a Nameless Fae and the wonderful Stariel series. AJ has just concluded a Kickstarter of some exceptionally beautiful special editions of the Stariel series. Holy goodness, they are fantastic.
And she is now very rich, which is just phenomenal for her. Not jealous at all.
I nearly spent way too much money on the kitten edition. I was like, I'm not joking. Anyway, and I've always relied on AJ to explain anything I don't understand in craft books. It's a fantastic service. You should try it. The tenebrous Steffanie Holmes is a USA Today bestseller, heavy metal pilgrim, am I wrong? And author of the Nevermore Murder Club and Smutty Book Coven series, as well as creator of some of the coolest merch in the book world you will ever find. I know I go on about the plushy ravens, but I've just got two words for everyone: plushy ravens.
There he is.
Plushy ravens. I mean, look, take my money, as they say. The sagacious Marie Cardno finally writes cozy fantasy and monster romance, as we all know. Her Monster Girlfriend trilogy, which I think everyone on Earth and the Inner Planets has read by now, is out now, and you can read it along with her next project, Bread Knives and Boomsticks. I'm glad I got that right, on her Patreon. And we'll have time for questions at the end, but if you do have any as we go, please pop them in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep up with them. So, without further ado, let's begin. What was the first question that we had? First thing is, let's flip down to the cover part, and I had one question to kick things off for the panel. What things on a cover signal particular story elements in cozy fantasy to you? For instance, a difference between a frame cover with objects versus an illustrated couple. Anybody?
I feel like, and this is just looking at, a couple of them, but I feel like when you have an illustrated cover, that's a little bit more of a cute, especially if it's an illustrated couple, that's a little bit more of it's a cozy fantasy romance versus a non-romance or where romance isn't the main plot. But I know that's not like a universal rule, because I know, Steph, yours are typography and are romance. But
Yes.
I feel like if you see a couple, it's a cue.
Yes, I would agree. That's kind of one of the big things that I sort of picked out immediately. And it's going to be interesting because most of you probably don't know, so I'm legally blind and I'm completely colorblind. So this is a very interesting, interesting exercise.
I forgot about that. Sorry.
my insights, will be yeah. I really like the covers that have like a central object. Like I'm picking out one at the moment that's got like two beer steins clinking
Yep.
together, and I really love.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the ones where it's got the kind of central object that really is like a focal point in the story. So when you see that central object, you go, this is a thing about about like fantasy, and the rest of the cover kind of signals that fantasy element. You're like, there's fantasy and there's beer, that is my jam. The ones with dragons on them, there's dragons, and that's my jam. So I think that central, you see quite a few with that kind of central image, which kind of signals to the reader this is going to be a really big story element. It's probably one of the things I picked out.
Yeah. I think a strong central element like that also helps with series branding.
Yes.
Because you've got one thing that can anchor the series from a long way away. AJ, I think you do this. I know, like, you're probably getting sick of me going on about how awesome your covers are, but I think you do that really well with the Star Reel covers because they're very clearly identifiable. They're all very different, but they're all clearly identifiable from 6 feet away.
Well, I was thinking about like a little bit, like a slightly step higher of like what are the cozy fantasy signals? Because obviously there's several different kinds of covers you get. Like you get the sort of like frame and typography covers. You get like illustrated like couples, often with more romance, but not all cozy fantasy romance has that kind of cover. And then you get like these illustrated setting covers are also a thing. And I think the kind of unifying forces are things like cozy objects, either in the illustration or in the frame. You have this sort of, often they have this sort of sense of like, I want to say like maximalism rather than minimalism.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of kind of fiddly details. The fonts can be kind of more elaborate. And like the colors,
and whimsical, often the fonts.
Yeah, and the colors are for Steph's benefit. The colors are like greens, pinks, purples, blues, like earth tones, like tones we associate with like magic or nature or warmth. And what you really don't see in cozy fantasy covers is like black and white and red. Those, which is quite interesting because if you look at like epic, particularly epic romantasy covers right now, which often have central object covers, they tend to be very black and red. So
I will say I guess the one that tests the rule right in the dead center of this cover is Caitlin Rosaki's Dreadful, which is black and red and white. But the coziness comes into this cover, despite what we'd normally think is more epic or dark color scheme. The coziness is in the slightly more whimsical font. The use of a scroll moving along that the text is on, and the sort of cartoonish central object with a floral or greenery vine frame around it.
So, looks like an old-fashioned fairy tale kind of book.
Wow, Google's bringing up 0 results for me. Thank you.
I also think and not just the cover, but I think the title too is pretty important when it comes to cozy fantasy, because like Tao Wong's The Nameless Restaurant, or Scales and Sensibility, which is a Stephanie Burgess title, or Myths and Manuscripts, or whatever it is. But like I feel like you got to have some sort of like whimsy or like alliteration or something that sort of is, I don't want to say cutesy, but kind of cutesy when you come to titles.
A bit of wordplay.
Yeah, like like How to Get a Girlfriend When You're a Terrifying Monster. Like that.
I was going to say all of Steph's Nevermore titles are
Yeah.
100% this.
on point.
Yeah.
Or
I had a lot of fun coming up with those.
A Pirate's Life for Tea. Like all of those just are sort of very clever wordplay. And you know, and that I think is important in, you know, when as important as the cover design is. Oh, you know, this is a cutesy title. It's probably cozy fantasy.
Yeah, I think I also think this kind of builds on something that I've been thinking about a bit, which is how interesting it is that in the titles, in the font choices in particular, but also often just in the themes in the books in general, there is this real interest in with cozy writers and cozy readers in bringing in nostalgia. And that comes, you know, so it's a lot of it is nostalgia for classic literature, which is why we get a lot of titles that reference classic literature in some way. A lot of the cover styles also reference classic literature, especially in the font choices, whether they go more kind of like Victorian or whether they sometimes, I notice sometimes on the thing that Nat's supplied, there's a lot that kind of reference like really early fantasy kind of fonts and things. Like sort of and so I think that's really, really fascinating. And it comes through a lot, in the sort of the themes of the books and how we kind of associate, we have these kind of cozy memories that we associate with these places, whether they're real places in our lives, like the local bookshop, or whether they're kind of fictional places that we used to go to, like when we first started reading these kind of books, like an inn in a fantasy novel. So I think that's really, really interesting.
Karen, I think we're just sort of speaking in general at the moment. So we've scrolled down on Nat's Kindle Trends presentation to the covers section, and I'm looking at all books, 200 titles.
It's like a big grid.
Pop that in the link.
Huge grid, yeah.
So just so people know, you can filter by clicking the buttons up the top to filter into different things, or if you're interested in a particular title or author or any of the other things, then you can type that in the filter box as well. That's so Steph, picking up on what you were saying, that was actually something that I was thinking about yesterday, oddly, because we were having an extended discussion about Dodie Smith's 101 Dalmatians, the 101 Dalmatians, which is from the 1950s. And I happened to look up the title, I happened to look at the cover of the one that I had when I was a kid, and it does look very much like a modern cozy fantasy cover. It's got a lot of, maybe a little less detailed and a little bit less lush, but it's got a lot of the same kind of visual elements. So the bed knobs and broomsticks, X and Y kind of thing, that again is a very deliberate reference, I think, to old-fashioned pre-war kind of fairy tales and stuff.
I also think, just speaking from my experience, and I published Drinks and Sinkholes in 2003, I think. No, 2023. I don't know what year it is.
2003 would be much longer ago. Your kids would be way older.
So a lot of so for those of us who were like at the beginning of the cozy fantasy trend, everybody was all about legends and lattes, and that has been like the thing, like the star to like, for me specifically, for like to like go to. And there's a really pretty UK cover, the Legends and Lattes UK cover was like,
oh, I know what you mean, with
beautiful.
like the shield kind of.
And I used that as my inspiration for Drinks and Sinkholes. Like, obviously it wasn't like a 1-for-1 replica, but I was like, I sort of pulled in pieces and this, that, and the other, and just fiddled with it until it looked good. And it resonated so much more than the one that I used for my Kickstarter, which actually I do have.
Which was an illustrated scene, I remember.
So like this, I was going like old school, like Dungeons and Dragons, kind of like, that's what I was going for with this. This did okay with the Kickstarter, but when I switched to the new, of course I don't have, nor my shorts, but like this is, and the nice thing about something like this is that you can just literally swap out like the icon and the colors, and you've got a brand new cover.
Yep.
And for like from a series perspective, it's great because I'm not designing a cover from scratch every single time because I am lazy and there are 10 books in the series. So not about that life. Thank you.
Well, it's a
I love that
branding.
combination of you're lazy, but you just wrote 10 books.
Yeah.
I like money. I like to make money.
Yeah. I think now there are a lot more opportunities for special editions and kind of remixes in one way or another. That's something that people are. I'm seeing authors increasingly give thought to when they're doing cover designs. Right. We've got a lot of people here who have had some fantastic special editions in different ways, and you can do a completely different cover, of course. But it's nice if you have something which is obviously a development or a kind of zhuzhing up of your base cover.
See, that's what I end up doing is I just do like this is a special edition of PJ Norris, which is the cover that is the cover. Isn't it
so shiny.
And so all I did was literally just put foil on the embellishments, and I'm like done.
Yeah, I sometimes do the same thing because I don't like repeating work, and also if the cover is really cute. So I've got but sometimes you can do so. This is the Nevermore Bookshop Kickstarter that we did, and what we did was we did brand new dust jackets which were exclusive to the Kickstarter. So you can only we've got like 10 sets of these left in my shop, but you could only get these dust jackets from the Kickstarter, and then so that was kind of like a special thing just for the Kickstarters. But then underneath that's the same book cover that you get on Amazon, but zhuzhed up, and then we zhuzhed up the inside too. So and there's maps.
That's exactly how I ran my Kickstarters too. Is I'm gonna make the Kickstarter blingy, and I'm gonna only order just as many as I need and no more because I obviously have plenty of other books on my shelf. Sorry, Marie, were you gonna say something?
I was just wondering if there was a connection to be made between the I guess the retro or vintage nostalgic feel of some of these particularly typographic covers and the maximalist design with the minimalist color scheme. So a lot of them, like your ones, Sash, and yours, Steph, have sort of feature colors or images, but we don't have the same, I guess. I'm thinking a few years ago now, particularly in the fantasy and paranormal romance genres, the like big swooshes of light effects and stuff like that. It's all a bit more pared down. It looks a bit more like the sort of thing where you might be able to see maybe a sort of thinking about how type is made and printed is more of a concern than I guess computer generated swooshes and things like that. But this is entirely me spitballing off the top of my head. I'm thinking of the more handwritten looking fonts that are used, sort of woodcut looks with the frames. Yeah, it all pulls into that nostalgia 40s, 50s post-war vibe.
Could it be a matter also of standing out in newsletters and stuff? So
sorry, I'm giggling at the question that just rolled in.
Oh, what have we got?
I will tell you that there are a lot of I don't know if they're AI or not, but I'm going to assume they're AI covers that kind of filter on into the cozy fantasy categories, like humorous fantasy specifically. I see a ton.
I think it's all part of cover signaling genre, right? I see one of those covers, and I think this is probably isekai or progression fantasy. It's probably not meant for me. It might be harem, it might be just
that's kind of
part of the genre that is telling the people who are after that, awesome, this is it.
I also think that kind of gets into we are all self-published, I think. And we are in charge of setting our own categories, and we are in charge of setting our own metadata, and Amazon does not police that, not typically. And so what ends up happening is you do end up seeing books in weird categories, especially, and I know AJ, I know you've been mad because Cozy Fantasy's been encroaching on your gas lamp, and you're not mad about it. But I know that so Cozy Fantasy Legends and Lattes ended up in Gas Lamp, and so we've all kind of moved in that direction because that's where the like I said, the North Star right now of Cozy Fantasy, and it's changing a little bit, but
so that's why.
that's kind of
Some of us were there first.
I know.
Yeah, well, the urban fantasy is the same. Sorry, carry on, Sasha.
No, and so like there is now a specific genre for Cozy Fantasy. Hallelujah. It's only for paperback and hardcover, which is annoying because it's kind of similar in paranormal cozy mystery, where like you have witches and wizards in paranormal cozy mystery in paperback and not in the ebook, and you're just the good news is you can run ads to an ebook from a paperback category, so it doesn't actually, it's super great. But I think part of the reason you see like kind of odd covers is because people are putting them like in the best spot that they think that this goes, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not. It's very long-winded. Sorry, everybody.
But basically when something gets really trendy, and Cozy Fantasy is rising as a trend, trad pub is all over this at the moment, and we will see a lot of trad pub cozy fantasy, cozy everything releases in 2026 and 2027. And so because of that, people start paying attention to that space, and they go, oh, my book has like a vaguely cozy thing to it, I'll stick it in there, and give it a go. And what does tend to happen over time is that you guys, the readers, you're not stupid, basically. You know what books you like and you know what books you don't like, and over time those books that aren't right for the category tend to get no attention paid to them, and they tend to drop off. So
yeah, I've often thought that a lot of the woe about books being churned out and so forth, although it's really frustrating, sometimes a lot of the stuff I see written about that implies, subtly or otherwise, that readers are essentially rather undiscriminating. Genre fiction readers are not discriminating, and this is not the case, I think, and I don't think there's anyone in here who would suggest that it is the case. So things tend to sort themselves out in terms of genre and categorization, but it can be a pain in the butt, and it can take a long time, and it can confuse readers and confuse authors and so on and so forth. Picking up on the question that was featured before, my instinct tells me that there will be an ebook cozy fantasy category probably within the next 12 months, because that's what's happened in a number of other areas. The lit RPG category, for instance, was added, or someone's going to tell me, I think it was about 18 months ago now. And that meant that an awful lot of it, lit RPG, was not being put in paranormal and urban fantasy, which helped the UF people and helped the lit RPG authors and stuff. And also at the same time, paranormal and urban fantasy got about 3 more categories as sort of subdivisions, which did help a little bit. We can gripe about animus and categories all day long, and I frequently do, but sometimes they are useful as a reflection of what Amazon thinks readers are looking for, whether that's right or otherwise.
So I see a comment on the thing from Lynn, and I just want to clarify that what we're talking about is not BSACs, BISACs. We are talking about Amazon's categories. Amazon does whatever the F they want in regards to categories, and they have no connection to the official. So I'm a white author, so I'm all over the place. So like on on Google, you have the BSACs, and on Draft to Digital, you have the BSACs, and you have, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but anyway, like you have them on some of the other white stores, but Amazon's like, and Kobo too does whatever. I don't really give, whatever. And so, if you are publishing outside of Amazon, you kind of have to and just figure it out. But so Amazon has their own, but there is a cozy fantasy on BSAC, but it hasn't shown up. I don't think it's shown up on Google yet, unless somebody else has seen it.
I haven't looked recently, but
there is a Thema. I think it's Thema. It's one of the non-BSAC versions on Ingram though, so that has shown up there, which is exciting.
Yeah. Most of those also are what I would call publisher side. That is, they aren't represented much in front of readers. One of the things I think I was griping to you about the other day, maybe Sush, was that most of the other stores don't have any kind of detailed reader side categorization. They've got maybe 1 or 2 levels, and that's kind of the lot. And they don't, over the time that I've been doing this, they don't show much indication that they're going to change that process.
Barnes and Noble has a pretty decent, like, you can drill down like that. They're actually pretty good with that. I don't think Kobo doesn't give you more options. Like, there's like fantasy and epic fantasy and general fantasy, and that's it for Kobo.
Yeah, it's about 2. Yep.
Exactly. And then and Apple just is a black box. Who knows? And Google is specific, like because they are Google. Unsurprisingly, their bookstore is very much like a search algorithm base. So you're not going to be filtering down. They want you to literally type in something in the search bar, and the metadata within your book is going to bring up what you want, which is why metadata is so important on Google, and why I don't know if y'all know Erin Wright, but she kind of has a whole class on how to maximize your. I know, Marie, are you wide? Steph and AJ, are y'all wide too, or y'all at KU?
No, my books are just on Amazon.
Okay.
I'm currently in KU, but I'm about to go wide in January. So
I would like totally, this is kind of off topic, but like definitely recommend if Erin Wright's doing another Google Play class. Google Plus, I haven't been around like 10 years, y'all. It was really worth the $100 to sign up for that, because it was a lot of really good information, and I've been able to use it going forward because Google is very metadata oriented, and so you kind of have to have a different idea with Google versus Amazon, and like to the point where you need to have like a different description for your book versus Amazon. So
I'm not super looking forward to it, but luckily I have
wide for the win.
You got a team.
I have an assistant. So I've got coaching with someone from Wine to the Win starting this month, and they're gonna help us kind of do it. So it's very good.
One
don't
of the
forget
things
about your roast, Steph.
What's that?
Yeah,
I said don't forget about your roast.
No, it's like 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
One of the things that just occurred to me then when you were talking about that, Sush, was that it seems to me quite likely that Google, because it has a whole lot of other information about people's browsing habits, is going to try very hard to show everyone a very, very personalized picture of books. So there kind of is no independent median sort of centroid. And that's why that's one of the reasons why the metadata is so important, because the metadata is going to be like 90% of with who your book gets shown to, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the same on Amazon too. Like you have to have really good keywords. Your categories have to be on par. Like your description needs to be on par. All of that kind of feeds into Amazon's algorithm. So they all have algorithms, but Google, Amazon specifically, like those are really, like they're really data heavy, more than like Barnes & Noble or Kobo or Apple. Apple doesn't love their bookstore. If they did, they'd update the UI on the author direct to upload. Steph, do not go direct to Apple. You will die. It's terrible.
No,
Marie, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you?
Look, I am so outside of the Apple ecosystem. I have a Mac, which I purchased some years ago just to use on Vellum, and it just it defies, like, I've been PC since I was 5, so I just don't understand how
I could go on
where it keeps putting my files or anything like that.
I could go on like an hour rant on why Apple Authors UI is the way that it is, but we're on Cozy Fantasy Trends, not me.
But I've been wide with my Monster Girlfriend books for a few years, and it's a different ecosystem.
Don't you just use Draft to Digital or something, Marie? I had sort of always.
I go direct to Amazon, direct to Kobo, direct to Google Play, and use Draft to Digital to load everything else to the.
Can you do direct?
And direct to Barnes and Noble. I do go direct to Barnes and Noble.
I wasn't sure if international or not, but yeah, it's definitely, you always want to use Draft to Digital. Go to Apple because
then you don't have to talk to Apple.
Quite. I had another couple of questions before we move on about covers. One of them was, so we've talked about the sort of maximalist trend in terms of details and stuff like that. I did see a couple of covers, and I suspect they're not very mainstream cozy fantasy that were actually the other way around, and they were quite low key and they just featured single objects. Does the panel think that that could be a trend in future? So, for instance, I'm looking at Blacksmith's Guide to Dragon Rearing, which is the words sort of middle right, which is the words A Blacksmith's Guide to Dragon Rearing.
I think that one's
so this looks like a pre-order cover, so I don't think this is the final cover.
Yeah, that doesn't look like a final cover.
Yeah. So it's just a placeholder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although there are a couple of others that I noticed as well, and I was wondering if you thought that was going to be a thing, or if there was room for the kind of discrete cover trend that we see in some other genres.
So on your grid, I'm seeing Ensorcelled by Elliot Pepper, and Quimby Olson's Centaur and Sensibility. Centaur and Sensibility, both with the title, no doubt, the book itself, and the cover is very much pulling back to that old. I am a hardcover published in the 18 or 1900s with one stamping of ink. So it's that very retro look.
I also have a feeling that might not be a full-length book. I could be wrong, but
the
and I know that sometimes authors, if they're doing covers for like novellas and short stories and things, they tend to be simpler anyway, just to save on cover expenses. So
and it's a 90-page book.
That's often the reason why covers are simpler, is not because it's representing a trend necessarily, but that it's trying to signal genre whilst saving the author the cost of the full elaborate cover they might.
I do wonder, and I'm just basing this off my own experience, that when we start to see more trad pub books come in to the genre, we might see a few more minimalist, sort of slightly more minimal ones. I am reading an ARC at the moment for Baby Dragon Bookshop, and that's it's got a baby dragon on it, and it's really kind of like a rom-commy cover to me. Is what it sort of says. My trad pub book, that's the cover there. So that's that's really quite minimalist, and the indie cover that I had was more maximalist, let's say. It probably would have fit in a little bit better in the graph. And when they showed this to me, when they first showed me this, I kind of went, I like it, but I don't love it. But then when I saw it on a rack in a shop, I suddenly got it. Like there was just something about that on a rack, and just that one central kind of visual element, and the font, and that just really signals like this is like the experience that you're going to get in the way I think that my other cover, which I can actually run and get, doesn't quite.
Okay.
No, Steph's gonna go do a roast.
Probably, yeah.
It's a very cozy fantasy.
It is actually, yes. Last question about covers then. Are there any elements or styles in the covers that we're seeing here that you don't expect, but you like? Or is there anything that surprises you in a good way that makes you go, wow, that's cool?
I am loving the dearth of illustrated covers.
Go ahead,
AJ.
Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, but I was going to say, I love the beautifully illustrated, and often these are trad covers, and I suspect were quite expensive to get made, but I love them, and I suspect we'll keep seeing them. I don't know that that indie will totally replicate that, because we tend to have lower budgets, but I love them, and I would love them for my books.
They're definitely not going away, are they? Because we all as writers and as readers, they're just too beautiful. Like they're not going away. That's my indie cover.
Oh, it is so pretty.
It's beautiful.
We might do special editions of this because I still love it, but yeah, it is.
I mean, I could totally see that with some
such
foil.
a different vibe. Yeah.
I also think I feel like there needs to be a schism between like paranormal contemporary cozy fantasy and like your, you know, what's happening back at the Shire kind of cozy fantasy. Because like, I think like there's a lot of covers that I'm seeing on here that I would put in the paranormal rom-com category versus true, I don't want to say true cozy fantasy, but like when we're talking about cozy fantasy, I think we all have like an idea of kind of what we're talking about. And so I think as that schism gets a little bit wider, and don't get me wrong, I love me a good, I love the Spell Shop book. So that's what I'm thinking about when I think of illustrated covers, is this beautiful Spell Shop cover. But yeah, I think a lot of it is that there needs to be a schism of like second world fantasy versus, you know, the contemporary rom-com kind of stuff.
I don't know if I kind of agree and don't agree. And I'm coming from a point of view of what I technically am probably as a paranormal rom-com author. And I think that the distinction, which is important, is more of like a writer conversation than a reader conversation. You know, the people that read my books, the vibe is quite similar to a second world cozy fantasy vibe. It's just it's in the modern world, and I don't. You guys tell us what you think, but I don't think that generally I don't think that readers that's how they choose their books. I think they just go, oh, that, you know, that's got the vibe I'm after. I'm not sure that necessarily going, well, I am strictly. I think a few people do, but I'm strictly only second world, proper traditional fantasy in a cozy setting, or I am strictly only, you know, paranormal. Also, I feel like this might, as you say, paranormal rom-com has not really been, it's not really a thing in the world of romance. And I think that's partly why a lot of us authors who write that have kind of been gravitating towards cozy fantasy, because it's kind of like the closest thing that encapsulates what we do, that actually has like a world, you know, like it actually has like fans. But as this becomes more popular, and what we're sort of looking at is a trend that is rising but has not yet crested. I think that distinction may, you know, there's going to be more space for it in the romance world, which means that we're going to stop, you know, nicking all of your categories and stuff. So, yay!
Someone very wise said in a talk I was watching ages ago that readers are loyal to a series first, a genre second, and an author a distant third.
Yeah, that's true.
Someone wise did say that.
Someone very smart.
Yeah, all right. Okay, it was Steph who said it, and every good idea I tend to get from Steph. And yeah, I think that's really, joking apart, I think that's really something that we're kind of seeing here, that the vibe aspect is strongest in a series more than it is anything else, even stronger in some ways than in a genre. And that's maybe doubly so when you have a nascent genre, which is kind of at the nexus, the intersection of a whole lot of different things, right? Because there's isekai progression fantasy stuff here, which has the slice of life aspect is cozy to some degree, but then there's what we might say sort of more traditional mainstream cozy fantasy, then there's the cozy mystery thing and stuff like that. Marie, did you have anything, going back to the covers question, is there anything there in those covers that made you go wow, or ooh, or ugh?
I just really enjoy that cover for Dreadful, which I brought up in my first comments. I think I love that it stands out against the other books because it is doing something a bit different that also cues in that it's a cozy version of you know, the Dark Lord sort of story. I really love the autumnal colors, the earth tones, and I think that there is potentially a split between the earth tones cozy fantasy and pink and purple blue cozy fantasies, and sometimes that feels a bit more like the pink and purple side of things is more paranormal. So I also have written the sort of cozy end of paranormal romance as Zoe
Mm.
Chant. I have a couple of series in that, and I was publishing them originally, as Steph said, when urban fantasy, paranormal romance was just one thing, and there wasn't really space to stand out visually as this is the more small town, cozy, like sweet vibes end of the genre. So yeah, I do agree, Steph, that is where us paranormal romance authors who are writing that sort of thing have, that's why we've gravitated towards these visual cues, the same way that secondary world cozy fantasy has.
I think the spell shop Enchanted Greenhouse, Sarah Beth Durst cover is quite interesting because it's just about the only one I could see that is what you might call a landscape cover rather than an object or illustrated couples. And because in other genres, the landscape only without figures or without figures being the center is quite a common structure. But
yes, but you're missing the winged cat up front.
Okay, there's the winged cat. I was getting to the winged cat, although I would argue that the winged cat is part of the whole thing rather than being the focus. You know what I mean? Whereas
it gives you the sense that, oh, this is going to be quirky. There's a cat with wings. Heck yeah.
It's the place. Yeah, it's the place aspect, which is quite interesting, I think. So. All right, let's move on. So the next thing then was topics. I'm conscious of the amount of time we've got, and if we don't get to everything, it's not the end of the world. So the next thing that we had was topics. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a big list of the things that I have done my best to work out are in different books. This is a very high level kind of a picture, but that's kind of deliberate because what we're trying to do here is get a general idea of the different things that people are talking about and sometimes where there are differences. So are there differences between KU and Wide in terms of what's talked about versus Indie and Trad and yada, yada, yada. My first question for the panel then is how much are you seeing traditional character traits like snooty elves and grumpy orcs being adhered to, and how much are you seeing them being subverted or changed? I actually found one book with a grumpy elf in it earlier today.
I mean, I'll just talk. I like to talk. So in the Weary Dragon series, magic is illegal, and all of the magical creatures have been rounded up and taken somewhere else. So I leave it blank, but they've all been. And so the presence of magic is sort of like exciting and new and interesting because it's all been taken away. But in like Drizzle of Magic, which is the one with the magical baker, like magic's a bit more like involved, and they're just other characters. And I think Spell Shop and Enchanted Greenhouse, which I just I read a couple weeks ago, they kind of had the main character is not exactly human, but like she just has purple skin and she doesn't necessarily have anything else about her that's magical or fascinating or interesting. And I feel like that kind of makes this is like a little bit fantasy, but also a little bit more relatable. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no, you go, AJ.
Well, I was thinking, I feel like this is a question that's sort of asking specifically about the kind of almost D&D style cozy fantasy that has like orcs and elves and dwarves and stuff, because not a lot of books don't have those, I guess, fantasy races in them. But where I have seen them, I guess I've seen a kind of, I don't think they are as traditional. And I noticed there was a question earlier that came up in the chat about queer characters in cozy fantasy, which I think I'm having this thought live, so excuse my incoherency. But I think even though cozy fantasy is kind of harking back to kind of nostalgia, traditional values, it's actually not traditional values in the sense of like being very rigid about people's roles in society. I think it's actually that doing the opposite, in being more inclusive, having examples of people with different disabilities or life experiences like anxiety, and yes, some
Yeah,
this making
and
sense?
it does make sense. And I'd like to pick up this thread to say that, I think a lot of the, as you say, the D&D style secondary worlds contain these very familiar elements, such as the various magical species and landscapes and worlds, but combined with what is a very common the plot trope of the midlife crisis of our magical creatures, who they suddenly change from whatever they were doing previously, like in Legends and Lattes. They're now starting a cafe. They're doing a cozy capitalism, and they are
I love that
taking
phrase.
they are taking a swerve from maybe what they were doing previously, which was often the more expected thing for a character of their type. And they're exploring new ways of being, new possible ways for them to take up space in the world and to interact with it.
Yeah,
I think that is part of the coziness, is finding this new way for yourself and finding acceptance there.
So the content's quite modern, even though the packaging is deliberately nostalgic.
Or even in Steph's book, the Fangs for Nothing one, where you've got sort of vampires, gothic castle, all the trappings of kind of traditional tropes, but then you've totally kind of subverted that expectation where the vampire issue is that he's a hoarder with his
just got hundreds of years of hobbies. And are we not all innately that person who has 10,000 unfinished hobby works?
If you were 400, think how bad it would be if you were 400 years old. It would just be like 8 times worse, right?
That is the literal whole, like, where I got the idea of the book from. Is that it's talking to my husband about
you're doing vampires,
you looked around at your house and you're like, what would happen if
that's literally
400 years went past? Oh shit.
Literally the conversation I had with my husband, because we're trying to figure out where to put his indoor train set, and we can't put it anywhere because our house is filled with other hobbies, like
with all your stuff.
with his other train sets and his drum kit and my pole stuff, and the dining room table's covered in Egyptian hieroglyph learning, and there's nowhere to put it. And you just think, what if you were? I said it's a good thing we're not vampires, because if we were 500 years old, we would have grim.
Hilarious.
And then that's where Thanks for Nothing came from. And it's interesting because when I talk to fans, a thing I often ask them is, are you an Alaric or are you a Winnie? Because the heroine of the story is a human, very sunshiny professional organizer who comes in and helps Alaric clean out his castle. And I always ask people, are you a Winnie or are you an Alaric? And I have never, ever in my life met a Winnie.
But we all want one.
We all want one. Everyone identifies with Alaric, and I love that. And I think this is quite a beautiful, where we've kind of ended up in this conversation is very beautiful, and it's something I think a lot about when I think about cozy, because I think I don't know if he's the first, but probably a writer, when I think about kind of where cozy sort of maybe started, I would always think about Terry Pratchett. And I think most cozy writers have come from a reading history where Pratchett is in there, along with a bunch of other stuff that we're drawing from. And one thing that he does exceptionally well, which is a thing that you see across, I have never seen a cozy book that doesn't do this, is he takes aspects of the fantasy world and also aspects of the real world that are very familiar to us, and he subverts them in ways that are humorous, but also so he subverts them for the humor, but also for the satire. So to say things about society.
And he always subverts in a humanizing way, even if they're inhuman. Sorry to interrupt, but it's always like aggressive kindness. Is what we get from the way that he retells ideas that we're familiar with.
Yes,
Yep.
and I see every time I read a cozy fantasy book, I'm drawn back to that feeling that I got when I first read a Terry Pratchett book, like that that I'm part of this, that these things that are familiar and beautiful in my life, and that like I'm part of this, and so I love seeing that in the books that we're all writing and reading now. And I think that is a lot of that is where people are able to draw in things like queer characters and disabled characters, which is particularly, particularly hits my heart because we didn't see that so much in the books that we read growing up, and now we're able to do that. To put those characters and those stories in these books and have them be the heroes, and yeah, it's cool.
I will say just real quick that my favorite cozy fantasies, and I had talked about this in the last panel, but I'm starting a new standalone cozy romantasy series because apparently my brand is not dark romance, so I've got to write actual cozy fantasy again. But I love like the NPCs, like the people, like in Spell Shop, she's like the fourth librarian, and she's just like, the sky is falling, and I got to save these books, and like just. I love the idea of like the big stuff is happening, but it's what's happening to this normal person over here. I love those books because how does the big, like we can reference it, and I just love that. And I know we have to wrap up, but that's what I love about cozy fantasy is that.
So time for one last question, which was a great one in the chat. What trends would the panel like to see in the cozy fantasy genre? Answer from everyone. AJ, you can go first.
This is a controversial take, but I would love more cozy horror. I love it where there's a deeply creepy, often setting going on, but you still get the kind of feel-good, heartwarming vibes. I don't know, that's something about that juxtaposition. T. Kingfisher does a lot of it. I really like it. I would love to see more. Please write them for me.
Steph, great question. Steph, how about you? What would you like to see?
I will also second that. I think we are seeing more cozy horror, but there's not enough. Just give me. The second thing is I would love to see, and maybe Secret Squirrel, I am doing this myself. I would love to see more cozy settings that involve like museums and archaeologists and that kind of, because I think there's something that a lot of us love about going to a museum, and I think we could.
You said ages ago, Steph, light academia.
Yes.
Still think that should be a thing. Light academia.
Cozy academia.
Yeah. Marie.
Gonna put in a third for cozy horror, which I'm sure is no surprise to AJ because we've talked about this a lot. But I think what I really love about that also is the prominence of the landscape and the setting as an immersive character in itself, which is something I also love to see in cozy fantasy in general.
Yeah, cool.
And finally, I do not want to see more horror because I am a wimp. I'll just say I just want to see more of the NPC. Like that's what I'm writing next is 5 NPCs that experience the same massive event at the same time and then go off to 5 different towns. And how do they see the event, and then how do they respond to the event that happened? And I just want more of that.
All right, thank you very much. Well, thank you to my wonderful panelists. This has been a huge amount of fun for me, anyway, if not for you. And thank you also to Lazy Dragon, to Misty and Jolly for giving us all the chance to pontificate. And thank you all to the listeners as well. Has anyone got anything else they'd like to say before we wrap up?
Stick around for Kickstarter, because I got stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to be right here in 4 minutes' time.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Jolly, help me out here. I've got